troops assembling. I'm Lisa Lacera, Fox News. Despite Russia's claims there are no plans to invade Ukraine, more Russian troops are surrounding the country.
3 Russian warships carrying troops, tanks, and other armored units have entered the Black Sea. Some fear this could be another invasion force, possibly targeting the port city of Odessa, Ukraine's 3rd largest city and a major tourist destination. The warships arrived as French President Emmanuel Macron met with Ukraine's President Zelensky in Kyiv. Macron met with Russian President Vladimir Putin the day before in Moscow.
Fox's Lucas Tomlinson. Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell is calling for a round of sanctions against Russia, including stopping the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, which would bring natural gas from Russia to Germany.
The president has all the authority he needs. He needs to decide the timing. I think it's going to be a serious deterrent if it's executed before the invasion, not after.
White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki said today the White House sees Nord Stream as leverage against Russia. President Biden was in Tennessee this afternoon, kicking off an effort to bring electric vehicles to the mainstream.
The announcement started with Australian company Tritium, a top electric charging station builder locating to Tennessee. Jane Hunter is Tritium's CEO.
Electric cars, vans, buses, aircrafts, boats. These are the future of transportation.
President Biden said it's not just about saving on expensive fuel, but also
making our country more economically competitive, lowering air pollution, and keeping families healthier as we tackle the climate crisis.
The goal, as part of the president's infrastructure law, building out 500,000 electric charging stations across America. Gernal Scott, Fox News.
Skier Michaela Schifrin's out of a second race at the Beijing Olympics, missing a gate in the first run of the slalom. America is listening to Fox News.
Jason in the house.
What's a better way to celebrate Valentine's Day than celebrating it at Mescla with their 3-course meal? Starting off your meal with a salad appetizer, followed by a main entree of your choice, and of course, to top it all off, to make Valentine's as sweet as the day itself, a melting lava cake with vanilla ice cream and caramel sauce. So what are you waiting for? Call them at 671-649-2652 or visit mesclaguam.com for reservations. See you there.
Hafa, this is Congressman Nicholas. While local COVID-19 testing has unfortunately become less available lately, there are 4 free at-home federally available COVID tests that you can have to test yourselves and your families as needed. Please contact your congressional office at 671-475-6453 or at michael.snicholas@mail.house.gov to find out how we can help you access those tests.
This ad was paid for with official funds from the office of Congressman Michael F.Q. San Nicolas.
The retired Pope begs forgiveness after an abuse scandal in Germany.
Pope Emeritus Benedict says he's issuing a heartfelt request for forgiveness over how cases of child sex abuse in the Catholic Church were handled during his time as Archbishop of Munich, Germany. In a letter, he writes, "I had great responsibilities. All the greater is my pain for the abuses and the errors." But he denied any personal wrongdoing and did not offer an apology. German investigators say the church covered up abuse for decades. In London, Simon Owen, Fox News.
The U.S. trade deficit soared to a record $859.1 billion last year as consumers splurged on foreign-made electronics, toys, and clothing. The trade gap, the difference between what the United States sells and what it buys from foreign countries, was up 27% last year. U.S. exports rose 18% to more than $2.5 trillion, but imports climbed 21% to nearly $3.4 trillion. Tom Brady not ruling out a return to the NFL.
Less than a week since he announced he would retire from playing in the NFL, 7-time Super Bowl champ Tom Brady did not rule out a chance that he might return to play.
I'm just going to take things as they come. I think that's the best way to put it. And I don't think anything never, you never say never.
From Monday's Let's Go podcast with Tom Brady, Larry Fitzgerald, and Jim Gray on Sirius XM Radio.
Fox's Jared Max. Brady said he has no immediate plans to come back, but you never know what challenges are ahead. A record 31.5 million Americans are expected to bet on this Sunday's Super Bowl, according to the gambling industry's trade group, the American Gaming Association, which also predicts over $7.6 billion will be wagered. The group says bettors include people making casual wagers with friends and relatives, office pools, wagers with licensed sports books, and bets placed with illegal bookmakers. I'm Lisa Lacera, and this is Fox News.
Good day. This is Claire Manglona from Security Title with an important warning. Wire fraud is real, and home buyers and sellers are one of the biggest targets, even on Guam. When sending money by wire transfer, be sure to confirm the wire instructions by phone, not email. In this case, it's good to be suspicious and know who you're dealing with. Let the professionals at Security Title work with you to minimize loss due to wire fraud. We are here to help.
Listen to The Point anytime, anywhere on Odyssey. Odyssey is your new audio home for all the music, news, sports, and podcasts that matter to you. Find your favorite stations like The Point and discover more. Music stations, local and trusted news sources, sports talk and team coverage, plus today's biggest podcasts. Find it all on the Odyssey app. AUDACY.
Guam Auto Spot has the best selection in Buick, GMC, Mitsubishi, and used cars like the 2021 Mitsubishi Mirage starting at $127 per paycheck, 0 down. Call 671-478-AUTO to take a test drive or get pre-approved online at guamautospot.com.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. How's that for a start of the program, Jose?
That sounds great.
Yeah, I'm fired up today, man. I want to talk about the Second Amendment. I also want to talk about Zemi Ikotni. Starting out with the Daily News. Wow. Our view, Guam DOE needs a solid plan to bring students back to the classroom. I have an idea. Why don't you ask them how to do it? No! We found out yesterday that if you give the kids a choice between summer vacation and more school, surprise, surprise, they're going to take summer vacation.
They're waiting for the surveys to come back.
Exactly. With the return to face-to-face learning, it was inevitable that Wuhan virus cases would increase on school campuses. This has led to a shortage in staffing in public school classrooms. In response to the shortage, the Department of Ed launched Operation Guardian last month, which temporarily places the department's office employees in classrooms as substitute teachers. This was to prevent a delay of live lessons and to supervise students, Deputy Superintendent Erica Cruz said in an interview last month. Operation Guardian is a good short-term program, but programs like this cannot continue throughout next school year. As of Monday, there have been hundreds of students and employees who tested positive for the virus since they've returned to classes in January. It's to be expected that schools will use Operation Guardian as the high number of positive cases continue. Out of the 41 schools, 15 are using the program every day. We know that the best thing for our students is to remain in school, to be able to be taught face-to-face. We appreciate our division heads allowing these employees to help assist, even if it's a couple hours or even the whole day assisting, Cruz said. If Operation Guardian isn't sufficient to cover the school's needs in the next 4 months, Superintendent John Fernandez said he plans to shift 1 or 2 schools to remote learning while moving staff from those campuses to support other schools. Another plan to make up lost school days is summer school, an idea introduced by Guam Education Board member Robert Crisostomo. Though the department plans are good ideas for short-term fixes, these Band-Aids can't be relied on for the upcoming school year. Students starting school next year need to have stable instructional days and consistent educators. Though the pandemic has brought challenges to normal operations, students' performance has shown the need for face-to-face learning to progress. Students who've been attending classes on a daily basis tend to do better. And of course, since they returned to face-to-face, we are seeing some additional achievement, said Deputy Superintendent Joe Sanchez last week. It's critical that the Education Department is back to normal by the start of 22-23 school year, as normal as it can be as in a community living with the Wuhan virus. The education agency must begin communicating with students, parents, and teachers now. Share the plan for next school year and prepare students for live instructions. This is kind of like a halftime speech, Jose, where the basketball coach calls the team together and said, we're behind now. We're behind 20 points. So I'm going to tell you what we've got to do during the second half. Make more baskets. Okay, let's go get them.
Coach, why didn't you tell us this in the beginning?
Exactly. And I'll even add something to that. Don't let the other team make baskets. Wow, what a dynamite combination, right? Okay, since the Post is on strike and not doing editorials, I took a letter to the editor that ran in both newspapers, and I'm going to substitute it for a Post editorial. If it were on the card, the caption would be this: Rebob versus repeat.
Say that again.
Rebob versus repeat.
Got it.
Yeah, okay. You want me to repeat?
Sure.
All right. Rebob versus repeat. And the Daily News, boy, sometimes you wonder if they outsource headline writing and in search of objectivity, they have someone write the headline who does nothing at all about the story, apparently.
You probably read the first sentence.
Yeah. So, letter, San Nicolas poorly informed on Guam's constitution. Recently, Guam delegate Michael San Nicolas, at the suggestion of someone he did not identify. Boy, we're off to something kind of sinister in the beginning, aren't we?
Maybe he didn't know the pronouns.
Yeah. Suggested that Guam should revisit adopting a Guam constitution. Despite this being a local and not a federal issue. Oh, really? Is that so? And notwithstanding this very weak grasp of the history and implications of such an endeavor, as evidenced during his presentation to members of the Guam legislature and his responses to questions posed by Guam senators and local media, this has generated a lot of discussion here on Guam, on social media and the talk radio circuit. San Nicolas appeared to be poorly informed of the history of the two past Guam constitutional conventions and could not answer simple questions about the implications of having a Guam constitution. Maybe the Daily News is not so far off after all. I wonder if he's going to spend any time talking about the Constitution, or is he too busy just beating up on San Nicolas? He also seemed to think that this endeavor would be relatively quick and simple to accomplish and would not be costly. It would, in fact, not be quick or simple or cheap. Lee Weber suggested in his weekly column that Guam should patriate or adopt the Organic Act of Guam as Guam's constitution, as previously suggested by former Guam Senator Robert Klitzkie, who does know what he's talking about and does have a good factual background here. I forgot to say that, repeat. Klitzkie introduced a bill while he was a senator in the legislature that would accomplish this. Weber argued, as Klitzkie had, that this would take the power of the Organic Act and move it from the realm and control of the U.S. Congress directly into the hands of the people, thereby avoiding the time-consuming and expensive work of drafting an entirely new constitution from scratch. I respectfully disagree. Well, I think, repeat, I think Repeat knows that I'm a very fair person, and no matter how wrong a person is, I will still defend his right to be wrong. Yeah, so let me just stop here and tell you where you missed the boat, Repeat. If we were to patriate the Organic Act, if you were to take a look at the bill that I introduced in the 28th Guam legislature, which was pretty much copied and reintroduced by Jim Moylan, no surprise there, and he's advocated it as hard as he's advocated anything else. But the genius in the plan is this, that the Organic Act, those parts of the Organic Act that deal with strictly local government, would become the Constitution of Guam and therefore could be amended by the people of Guam. It would be, as I envisioned it, it would be a relatively deliberate process. In order to amend the Constitution, a bill or resolution, I guess a resolution would have to pass 2 successive legislatures in the same form, and then it would go out to the people in a referendum, and the Constitution would then be amended if half the people voted in favor thereof. Now, you can start out and say, well, no, we want to do it right. We want to start out from the very beginning. And you're going to spend a lot of time not very wisely, because in order to do that, you're going to have to entertain every wacky idea that comes along. I could suspect a special provision to protect transsexuals. Yeah. And a special provision for non-binary, and on and on and on and on, a reflection of all of the stuff that's going on nowadays that we read about all the time in the paper. Not that people don't have the right to those opinions and to voice those opinions, but I would submit that a constitution is more serious than that. If you look at the United States Constitution, it is it's almost boring reading, because it doesn't have anything inflammatory in it, and that's deliberately. So if we took the Organic Act that we have now, that we know very well because we've worked with it, we know where the flaws are, and we probably have a pretty good idea how to fix them. We fix those flaws, and if we want to go beyond that, 2 legislatures and a referendum, we can make it say whatever we want it to say. I suspect if we were to do that right now, and one thing I mentioned the other day, the strength of that amendatory process is that by requiring that the amendment pass 2 successive legislatures, senators would be forced to campaign for or against those amendatory provisions. So you'd get a high level of good discussion and a very detailed thought process in the manner in which it went. You weren't around, I don't think, for either of the first 2 constitutions. We didn't have Daniel Webster speaking from the floor. I'll tell you, without going into it too far. We didn't have Daniel Webster speaking from the floor of the Constitution. So we could do that, and if we were to do it today, I suspect that there would be bills introduced curbing the governor's emergency power to deal with public health emergencies. I think we could come up with something a whole lot better than what we've got right now that would be much more acceptable to all of the people on the island except for one. I don't want to mention the governor's name, but her initials are LG. So going on with Repeat's letter here. He said, first, we would not be starting entirely from scratch. We have the draft Constitution that we could use as a starting point because the draft Constitution has some fatal flaws. Secondly, this endeavor is extremely important, and I believe if we're going to do something this important, we ought to do it right or not at all. In other words, if you don't do it his way, don't do it at all. Third, the Organic Act is an extremely poor substitute for a Guam Constitution for reasons I will discuss below. That's exactly why you would want to amend it and bring it back around to where you think it should be. He says, I, for one, believe that adopting a Guam Constitution would be extremely beneficial for Guam and does not necessarily conflict with the self-determination effort that Chamorro activists who opposed it believed. In other words, the separatists.
Does this make him hopeless?
Yeah.
To the cause?
I think every Monday, about 90% of the island becomes hopeless. Yeah. Okay, repeat. I respectfully disagree with your statement that a constitution would be beneficial for Guam and does not necessarily conflict with the self-determined effort of the Chamorro activists who opposed it, believed. The Chamorro activists who oppose it are the separatists. And I've explained this before, they wouldn't want to be stuck with a constitution that has things in it like an equal protection clause, a due process clause, and things like that would hold them back from establishing what apparently is the real product here, which is a chamocracy, a government of Chamorros, by Chamorros, for Chamorros. And that's the reason for the Guam exit or Gwexit to start with. And that's one of the reasons they'll oppose it. The second reason they'll oppose it is that they would oppose anything that makes it look like Guam has more another degree of self-government, because they think it weakens their argument. Their argument is, these poor people in Guam, for 500 years, different countries have taken opportunities to really treat them badly, and it continues right up to this minute. And we don't have anything. Our only hope is to become an independent country. That's the rap that I detect whenever I see the separatist rhetoric. Then he goes on to say, this is evidenced by Puerto Rico and American Samoa's examples. They adopted constitutions, yet they did not resolve or even affect their respective self-determination efforts. What self-determined efforts does Puerto Rico have? The last time I saw any statistics is like 3% of the people in Puerto Rico want an independent Puerto Rico. They're pretty evenly divided between Commonwealth and statehood. And I haven't heard a peep about self-determination from anybody in American Samoa. But we'll get to American Samoa and the CNMI a little later on here. They adopted constitutions, yet that did not resolve or even affect their respective self-determination efforts. There's a saying that you better be careful for what you ask for. You might get it. In Guam's case, the business community desired a status quo, joined forces with the self-determination activists, and defeated the Guam Constitution. That's something else that I guess my memory is failing, because I don't remember the business community joining forces with OPIR and that side of the gang. If it had been adopted, it may have foreclosed any standing or cause of action that Arnold Dave Davis had to sue for the right to vote in Guam's plebiscite, and the Department of Justice's arguments against the Chamorro Land Trust Commission. I don't see how it would have had any bearing whatsoever in Dave Davis's lawsuit, unless you somehow could adopt a Guam Constitution that would be insulated from the 15th Amendment to the United States Constitution, which deals with voting. And as far as the Department of Justice and the Chamorro Land Trust, lucky for the folks that already have leases, the Department of Justice decided to settle that case. Okay, then he goes on to say, just look at the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands and American Samoa that have respective constitutions with articles and clauses that protect their native populations and establishes special status for the native people. Well, let's do that. Let's take a look at, let's start out with the CNMI. And the CNMI, the only thing that comes close to what Repeat is talking about is Section 1 of the CNMI Constitution. I don't have the right article number here, but it's Section 1, alienation of land, the acquisition of permanent and long-term interest in real property within the Commonwealth shall be restricted to persons of Northern Mariana's descent. And there's several sections after that telling you what Northern Mariana's descent is.
Okay, because that was going to be my next question, which is interesting because it is not one people.
No, it's two. And the second, the Chamorros were there, according to what we've been told, for 3,000 years. The Carolinians only got there after the Spanish rounded up all the Chamorros and brought them down here.
But they're included as the descent in the CNMI.
Native, yeah.
So it's more about citizenship, or, I don't know.
It's more about race. Yeah, it's not about indigeneity.
Oh, there you go, yeah.
Yeah, it's not indigeneity, because they're not, those folks are not indigenous to the Northern Marianas. Okay, now, in the beginning, one had to be blood quantum of 1/2 of Northern Mariana's descent in order to own fee simple title to real property in the Northern Marianas. They decided they didn't like that. And by the way, in order to prove up your descent, you have to go to the Superior Court. Yeah.
With a blood sample?
I suppose, yeah. Maybe one of those things from 24, what's it called, 46 plus, you know, one of those outfits, Ancestry.com.
Ancestry.
Yeah. But they changed it, and now they've gone back to the old Jim Crow rule. 1 drop of Northern Marianas blood, and you are Northern Marianas. That's the rule nowadays. But this was not some great invention on the part of the draftsman of the Constitution, and it wouldn't survive, it wouldn't go were it not for the CNMI covenant, which reads as follows: except as otherwise provided in this article, and notwithstanding the other provisions of this covenant or the provisions of the Constitution, treaties, or laws of the United States applicable to the Northern Mariana Islands, and the government of Northern Mariana Islands, in view of the importance of the ownership of land for culture and traditions of the people of the Northern Mariana Islands, and in order to protect them, against exploitation and promote their economic advancement and self-sufficiency, A, will until 25 years after the termination of the trust agreement, and may thereafter regulate alienation of permanent and long-term interests in real property so as to restrict the acquisition of such interests to persons of Northern Mariana Islands descent. So what it's saying is, for 25 years after the end of the trust territory, no one except a person of Northern Mariana's descent could own land in the Northern Mariana Islands. If the folks of the Northern Marianas Islands so desired, they could extend it beyond that 20 years, 25 years, but no less than 25 years. So this is part of the covenant. And that's the reason that it can be in the Constitution. Now, the key language here is this. Notwithstanding the other provisions of this covenant, the provisions of the Constitution, treaties, or laws of the United States. In other words, this part of the covenant says the 14th Amendment, equal protection, all of that stuff does not apply to that restriction on alienation of land. Now, where's Neil Weir? Neil Weir, are you listening? The only reason that section can withstand scrutiny is because of, guess what? The insular cases, which hold that the Constitution does not ex proprio vigere apply in the territories. And that very provision has been upheld by the District Court of the Northern Mariana Islands and by the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. So that's where it came from. But ask yourself this, repeat, is this really, as you say in your letter here, just look at the Commonwealth of Northern Mariana Islands and American Samoa that have respective constitutions with articles and clauses that protect their native populations and establish special status for native people. Well, is this protecting native peoples? Saying you can't, if you own Blackacre, you can't sell it? You know what that sounds like to me? Very paternalistic colonialization.
How dare they?
Yeah. You know, you folks, we got to, as Repeat says, we've got to protect you. So we're going to protect you by not allowing you to sell your real property. Okay, let's take a short break and we'll come back to that aspect.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Love is perfect timing. And now is the time to make a move on the apple of your eye. A new iPhone 13 and Apple Watch make the perfect pair. And you can get yours now during GTA's Valentine's Day special. For limited time, buy an iPhone 13 on HPO and get an Apple Watch 7 for free. While supplies last, terms and conditions apply. To find out more, visit gta.net or call us at 671-644-4482. Roses are red, violets are blue. At GTA, we start with you.
Do you have a car? Do you want to get rid of it? Yeah, yes. Yes, there are people. Absolutely. How did you know? Here's the deal. Take your used car to the guys over at Nissan Guam, and they're going to take a look at it. And if they love it, and they probably will because you take care of things, you could get all kinds of money on this, cash for your car. Used car values are higher than ever before. They'll take all makes and models. Doesn't need to be a Nissan or an Infiniti. They'll give you a super fast appraisal, and you say, shoot, sign the papers. Now, you can use that as down payment on a brand new Nissan if you like, or maybe you need a used car. Maybe you're sitting around going, well, I guess somebody's going to come in, they're moving to Guam and whatever, and they're going to need a ride. So let's go to Nissan Guam and check out the great sale they've got. The Nissan Ninja sale is going on. So all those used cars that people are taking in, well, they refurb them, change out the oil and the belts and all of the things that need to get taken care of, and turn them practically into brand new automobiles and give you some incredible savings, up to $14,000 on the used car inventory. Go and take a look at it. NissanGuam.com.
Welcome back to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, Guam's single voice of reason. Call now, 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
So that what I might argue is paternalistic colonialism provision in the covenant between the Northern Mariana Islands and the U.S. allows that constitutional provision that says that you must be of Northern Marianas descent to own fee simple title to realty in the Northern Marianas. Now, let's just hypothesize a little bit. And let's say that we go along with Repeat's suggestion and we have our constitutional convention here. And Repeat is a delegate, and he makes the same argument. He says, I happen to have the language from the Northern Marianas Constitution right here. Let's adopt it for Guam. And if we have to get Congress to give us permission, we'll do it. How would that sit? How well would that sit?
Does this mean that you would have to be off of the commission too?
Well, what it means is this, that if you were one of the people for whom against whom real property was taken, and that real property came back to you now, providing you with a tremendous windfall, you couldn't sell it. Protecting the culture. You wouldn't be able to sell it. You wouldn't be able to sell it for $3 million to a company that ultimately sold it to Cortec. You'd have to hang on to it. Yeah. All in the name of protecting the culture. I wonder how well that one would work here if we tried that. And by the way, some of the research that I did suggests that when Mr. Wanpat testified before Congress on the Organic Act, that option was discussed, and Wanpat turned it down. Said, no, we don't need that. I suppose reasonable minds would differ, but I don't see this as being rooted in the culture of the Northern Marianas. The fact that you can't sell your land is part of the culture of the Chamorro folks. It just doesn't seem right to me. It seems to me like a legal mechanism that has a commercial dimension to it that may ultimately affect cultural practices, because you can't sell your land. You're going to have to make the best of it, right? But that's the only thing in the Commonwealth, in the Constitution of the Northern Marianas, although Repeat says, just look at the Commonwealth that have respective constitutions with articles and clauses that protect their native populations and establishes special status for the native people. Well, in the case of the Northern Marianas, there just had one clause that said if you are Chamorro or if you are Northern Marianas descent, you can own real property, and that's it. And of course, this extends to people that are not the native peoples. This would be the non-Chamorro people of Northern Marianas descent. But it's just that one section. The rest of the Constitution and the Constitution of American Samoa bear amazing similarities to the Constitution of the United States. I wonder why. Okay, now as far as American Samoa is concerned, this is what we have for Samoa. American Samoa Constitution, Article 2, Section 3, qualifications for the legislature in Samoa. A senator shall be, 1, a United States national. Now, I don't know if that could be interpreted to mean that if you are a citizen, you can't be. Yeah, well, we have citizens and nationals, but my recollection, and I didn't research this, is that there are two kinds of nationals, citizens and then non-citizen nationals. So you must be a United States national. You can't be from what used to be called Western Samoa. 2, you must be at least 30 years of age at the time of election. It says he must be at least 30 years of age at the time of his election. Whoa. It doesn't say their election.
Very interesting.
Yeah. 3, must have lived in American Samoa at least 5 years and have been a bona fide resident thereof for at least 1 year next preceding his election. So you have to be domiciled there for 5 years and resident there for 1 year. And number 4, be the registered matai of a Samoan family. I've got to do some interpretation here. So ti tungu na I fino Samoa, lo I palabran mata gi fino Samoa, ti parejo no I palabran mata gi fino Chamorro. It doesn't mean dead.
Okay, because I was going to say, you know what? There are sure a lot of Democrats on Samoa, yeah. Democrat voters.
Yeah. So a matai is, I suppose that we could come close to it with something like the word chief in the non-naval or fire department sense. I don't want to talk in terms of Native Americans because.
So a head of household.
Yeah. So be a registered Matai of a Samoan family who fulfills his obligations as required by Samoan custom in the county from which he is elected. So the upper house then, person has to be a traditional chief is what it amounts to. Lower house, a little bit more wide open. So that's one of the protections that is in the Constitution of American Samoa. Now, American Samoa, once again, is one of those places that really takes it in its shorts because of those horrible insular cases. Just like I pointed out with the Northern Marianas, that non-alienation provision gets by because of the insular, because of Downs versus Bidwell. And I'll bet Neil, that's why Neil Weir wants to have Downs overruled. He doesn't want these things to go on. The people just don't realize how much better off they'd be without them. Okay, then the second provision in the Samoan Constitution, and the important thing about the Samoan Constitution is this. The folks in America and Samoa had more than one constitution, and when they finished with it, they send it to the Secretary of Interior, who does a memo, and that's it. It then becomes the Constitution of American Samoa. It doesn't require Congress or anything else. So it's relatively easy for the folks in Samoa to put together their constitution. And here's Article 1, Section 3, and it's titled Policy Protective Legislation. It shall be the policy of the government of American Samoa to protect persons of Samoan ancestry against alienation of their lands and destruction of the Samoan way of life and language contrary to their best interests. Yeah, they got to protect the Samoan people. Such legislation as may be necessary may be enacted to protect the lands, customs, culture, and traditional Samoan family organization of persons of Samoan ancestry and to encourage business enterprises by such persons. No change in the law respecting the alienation or transfer of land or any interest therein shall be effective unless the same shall be approved by two successive legislatures by a 2/3 vote of the entire membership of each house and by the governor. So there you got it. So once again, now how well would this work here? Because these are the only two provisions. You got to be a chief in order to be in the upper house, and the second one, a strict restriction on the alienation of real property. How well would that work here if we had our own Constitution? I don't think it would work at all. I don't think anyone would think that it would be a good idea for people to not be able to sell their real property if they so desired. Okay, so that was my respective disagreement there, Repeat. Then going on back to Repeat's letter, this leads me back to my previous point that the Organic Act is a poor model as a Guam Constitution. Like the CNMI and American Samoa Constitution, many state constitutions have articles and clauses that recognize the native indigenous people. Are there any other kind of indigenous people? I don't think so. Provides protections and reserves certain special privileges for natives based on historical cultural practices. I'm not aware of such a thing. And if such a thing exists, perhaps Repeat can get us a sample or two. The Organic Act is pretty much a carbon copy of the U.S. Constitution in all of the more substantial provisions and provides no protections for the Native people. Horror of horrors. But now, Repeat, you were after Mike San Nicolas a little while ago on his lack of historical knowledge. So I'm gonna lay some historical knowledge on you. that I mentioned the other day on Tall Tales. If you miss one episode, boy, you know, it's kind of like missing a really important day in algebra class. It's really hard to catch up. Section 9A of the Organic Act, as enacted, repeat, said this: the governor shall accept it as otherwise provided in this act or the laws of Guam, appoint by and with the advice and consent of the legislature all heads of executive agencies and instrumentalities. In making appointments and promotions, preferences shall be given to qualified persons of Guamanian ancestry, with a view to ensuring the fullest participation of Guamanians in the government of Guam. Opportunities for higher education and in-service training facilities shall be provided to qualified persons of Guamanian ancestry. So that was in the Organic Act as enacted. Now, again, my recollection, which I don't hold on to be 100%, but this is what I remember. In 1968, we had the 11th elected governorship amendment to the Organic Act, which also incorporated the so-called Mink Amendment. And the Mink Amendment said that the Bill of Rights, to the extent that they didn't apply, were now applicable to Guam. And one of the other things that was included in that legislation was a removal of Section 9A, the one that I just read. And again, my recollection is the reason that it was removed was because the Young Turks went down and testified and said, we don't need this anymore. Please remove it from the Organic Act. Carl Gutierrez could probably fill me in on that because I think he was one of the young Turks back in those days. But I could be wrong. That's just my ever fallible memory that kind of goes back to that. But yeah, the Organic Act is pretty much a carbon copy. And as I mentioned, if you look at the constitutions of American Samoa and the Commonwealth of Northern Marianas, they really seem to be kind of similar. Could that possibly be because the United States Constitution is about as good a constitution as you'll ever find anywhere in the world? That would be my guess. That would be my suggestion, that it's supposed to be a neutral document that doesn't favor any particular group or person. It prohibits royal titles and things like that. So then, repeat, goes on a little bit further, and he said the Organic Act is pretty much a carbon copy of the U.S. Constitution and all of the more substantial provisions, and provides no protections for the native people. Well, it did once. This is why Davis and the Justice Department were successful against Guam. Guam is an unincorporated territory like CNMI and American Samoa, but unlike CNMI and American Samoa, Guam has nothing to protect its natives. That is very true. Okay, now we get down to that's all been the predicate. We'll get down to what this is really all about here right after a short break.
What's a better way to celebrate Valentine's Day than celebrating it at Mezcla with their 3-course meal? Starting off your meal with a salad appetizer, followed by a main entree of your choice, and of course, to top it all off, to make Valentine's as sweet as the day itself, a melting lava cake with vanilla ice cream and caramel sauce. So what are you waiting for? Call them at 671-649-2652 or visit mezclaguam.com for reservations. See you there.
Half a day, this is Congressman Senator Nicholas. While local COVID-19 testing has unfortunately become less available lately, there are 4 free at-home federally available COVID tests that you can have to test yourselves and your families as needed. Please contact your congressional office at 671-475-6453 or at michael.snicholas@mail.house.gov to find out how we can help you access those tests.
This ad was paid for with official funds from the office of Congressman Michael F.Q. San Nicolas.
Okay. I took a peek at Facebook here during the break, and guess who posted something on Facebook? But he's a little short of words. He only posted it once instead of twice. He didn't repeat it. But let's see what he said here. I am not suggesting we copy CNMI or American Samoa. I'm saying we do something on Guam that can rectify the issue with the Chamorro Land Trust and for the plebiscite. Well, you aren't going to be able to do that in your Constitution, repeat. You can do, the United States Congress can do that. The United States Congress could very easily pass a statute that says the provisions of the 15th Amendment shall not be applicable to any I'm going to get Paul on my butt here, but any plebiscite measuring the wishes of the Chamorro people concerning self-determination. And the Congress has that power, and it would pass constitutional muster. You know that because of Downs versus Bidwell, etc. And as far as the Chamorro Land Trust is concerned, I'm afraid that horse has already left the barn because our local government settled with the Justice Department. And it's no longer, although the name is still the same, it's no longer the Chamorro Land Trust. It is the eligible people are those who are the descendants of folks whose land was taken by eminent domain. So you couldn't get there with the Constitution because the Constitution is going to have to conform with the Constitution of the United States. That's where the Northern Marianas really beat us to the punch. We were, and mixing metaphors, we were really asleep at the switch when that happened, because that would have been the time to go to Washington and do some lobbying, saying, hey, you played it for her, play it for me, play it again. No, wait a minute. That's...
Well, then we send repeat.
Yeah. Yeah, you did it for them, do it for us. Let's sit down and come up with the same stuff that you put in their covenant. And then we'll get out of here and we'll be happy. But we were asleep at the switch when that came along. We didn't do it. And I suspect that probably because of that, we may never have the chance to do it, especially if we have to keep doing this woe is me routine at the United Nations, keep telling the world what a horrible place Guam is, how horrible the United States is. Somehow that is ordinarily not a very good predicate to negotiation. Okay, now, I said that I'll get down to what Pete has laid the foundation for, and here it is. The last paragraph in his letter. Some might argue that establishing protections and reservations for the natives creating a privileged or special class. But is it really? Well, yes, of course it is. If you create protections and reservations for natives, you are creating a privileged class. Now, if there's a justification for the privileged class, you might want to talk about that, but to say that it isn't, that's a hard one to swallow. He goes on to say, but is it really? Remember, protections and reservations for natives are only made necessary because of the removal of their autonomy. Now, when we talk about natives, my mind instantly clicks to Native Americans, because if you're looking at the law, that's where all of the law comes from. And I know a little bit about it, not as much as I'd like to, because the University of New Mexico had an Indian law center, being so close to the Navajo reservation, Pueblo Indians, etc. So many of the special protections that Native Americans enjoy is because they are members of a tribe. And I've been through this so many times before. Article 1, Section 8 of the United States Constitution says, in paragraph 3, Congress shall have shall have the power to regulate commerce with foreign nations and among the several states and with the Indian tribes. So the Constitution recognizes tribes as being subordinate sovereigns. And the United States entered into several treaties with subordinate those tribes, broke an awful lot of them. Some of them are still in place, and some of those treaties provide special hunting and fishing rights, things like that. And then, even real property, reservations. And if a person is an enrolled member of an Indian tribe, then certain other benefits may flow to him and to the tribe. For instance, the United States, I think, did a horrible disservice to Native Americans by giving them a gambling franchise nationwide. But that's what happened. So that's where those things come from. So it's not because, this is what Repeat says, protections and reservations for natives are only made necessary because of the removal of their autonomy. It's because of various treaties and the recognition of the status of Native Americans in tribes. Not if you are a Native American, let's say that I'm Chief Bob of the Blackfeet tribe in Wisconsin. The fact that that's who I am doesn't get me anything unless I'm the member of a tribe. So that's where a lot of these things come from. But he goes on to say, only necessary because of the removal of their autonomy, the suppression, destruction, and substitution of their culture and language, and the opening of a homeland to outsiders who displace the natives. It's not giving the natives anything. It's protecting the natives from totally losing everything. I wonder if Repeat consulted with Michael Bavacqua on this last sentence here. It's protecting the natives from totally losing everything when everything has been taken away. Everything has been taken away. Yeah. So, there are things to chew on here and everything but the last paragraph. There are different points of view. Certainly, I've expressed mine. I will stand by them, etc. But when you get to the last paragraph, you're just talking about a subjective anecdote. And I would suspect that if I felt like it, I could go out and round up a lot of people who would say something just the opposite, who would say something like, we are so lucky that Guam became a United States territory because of the Spanish-American War. And we are now living the American dream, which we wouldn't be able to do if we were living anywhere else on this vast Pacific Ocean. So a subjective anecdote, in other words, an expression of a feeling, falls a little bit short of an argument. Let me find out what Kellis has got to say, and then we got a break for the big halftime show. Go for it, Kellis.
Hey, real fast, I was just curious, Chamorro Land Trust.
Yeah.
So how come they gave away land to so many people, I have a piece of property, etc., instead of giving all that land to the original landowners?
Well, wouldn't have been as politically as popular, I think. The reason for that,
so they're still giving land away, I think, right? So like the property up there in Barragata, which people were trying to have roads given to.
Yeah.
Why don't they give that whole piece of property as a whole to the original landowner?
Well, that's the new law, that you have to be a descendant of a pre-condemnation owner to be eligible for Chamorro Land Trust property. Gotta go, Kellis.
I go. Bye.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
A Republican congressman says he's being spied on by Capitol Hill police. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. Texas Congressman Troy Nell is accusing Capitol Police of investigating his office and staff illegally.
Nell says police went into his office without his permission in November and took photos of confidential material, an allegation that Capitol Police Chief Tom Manger denies. Manger says an officer found the door to Nell's office open and went to investigate, but Nels believes he's being targeted in part because of his criticism of the department's handling of the January 6th Capitol attack.
I'm telling you, they're coming after anyone that has a dissenting point of view, anybody that doesn't agree with them.
More than 30 Republicans are calling on House Speaker Nancy Pelosi to look into reports of Capitol Police monitoring lawmakers, staff, and Capitol visitors.
Fox's Madeline Rivera. The House has passed a stopgap spending measure that would avert a possible government shutdown at the end of next week, assuming the Senate goes along with it. The House also passing a bill to reform the U.S. Postal Service.
The Postal Service has been saying unless Congress acts, it's going to run out of cash by 2024. Now the House has passed the Postal Reform Act. It ends the requirement that the service pay in advance for health care for current and retired workers for the next 75 years. It also means the service has to set up an online dashboard so users can see how long it takes to get letters and packages delivered. The measure got bipartisan support in the House. It's expected to get the same when it heads next to the Senate.
Fox's Jill Nato in Washington. Students tried to present cease and desist paperwork to Loudoun County, Virginia school board members last night over their face mask mandate. The board members refused to accept it. Loudoun County has rejected Governor Youngkin's executive order that gives parents the last word on whether their kids must mask up in school. America is listening to Fox News.
The Fox Weather app is changing the way you think about it.
Always here to help you. This island is our home. Through the years, we've been a friend to the neighbors we have known. Now we're banking on the future. More services to choose. Bank Pacific, where others put branches, we place roots.
Listen to The Point anytime, anywhere on Odyssey. Odyssey is your new audio home for all the music, news, sports, and podcasts that matter to you. Find your favorite stations like The Point and discover more. Music stations, local and trusted news sources, sports talk and team coverage, plus today's biggest podcasts. Find it all on the Odyssey app. AUDACY.
And cool the tensions over Russian troops at Ukraine's borders.
French President Emmanuel Macron says Russian President Vladimir Putin told him he will not escalate things with Ukraine and that there's no permanent deployment of Russian troops in Belarus. The Kremlin said no deal was made and leaving Belarus after drills had been the plan anyway. White House spokeswoman Jen Psaki was asked if the U.S. is being left out of talks here.
There are others. The German Chancellor, who was just here yesterday, is also meeting with President Putin tomorrow, and certainly if there is diplomatic progress, we would welcome that, but we will believe it when we see it with our own eyes at the border.
Psaki said the president spoke with Macron twice in the week leading up to his meeting with Putin. Jessica Rosenthal, Fox News.
A second man charged in an alleged plot to kidnap Michigan's Governor Gretchen Whitmer is expected to plead guilty on Wednesday. That would leave 4 men to face trial next month and give prosecutors a possible second insider who could be a key prosecution witness. Caleb Franks, in a document filed with the court Monday, said he would admit to guilt in the scheme to kidnap the governor. FBI agents stepped in and arrested that group back in October. Already plagued by low ratings, companies are now facing pushback for sponsoring the 2022 Olympic Games.
Marketing experts say affiliation with the Beijing Games has turned into a liability. 13 top sponsors paid an estimated $100 million each for rights to use the iconic Olympic rings in ads airing during the Games. NBC Universal has spent $7.75 billion for Olympic broadcasting rights through 2032. But the usually high-profile opening ceremony, meant to highlight the host nation's culture, didn't turn out to be ratings gold. Viewership was down nearly 70% among the key demo compared to South Korea's 2018 Games.
That's Fox's Jillian Turner. The U.S. has yet to win a gold medal at the Beijing Olympic Games. I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Hafaday, this is Congressman Nicholas. While local COVID-19 testing has unfortunately become less available lately, there are 4 free at-home federally available COVID tests that you can have to test yourselves and your families as needed. Please contact your congressional office at 671-475-6453 or at michael.snicholas@mail.house.gov to find out how we can help you access those tests.
This ad was paid for with official funds from the office of Congressman Michael F.Q. San Nicolas.
Love is perfect timing. And now is the time to make a move on the apple of your eye. A new iPhone 13 and Apple Watch make the perfect pair. And you can get yours now during GTA's Valentine's Day special. For a limited time, buy an iPhone 13 on HPO and get an Apple Watch 7 for free. While supplies last, terms and conditions apply. To find out more, visit gta.net or call us at 671-644-4482. Roses are red, violets are blue. At GTA, we start with you.
Subway keeps the Eat Fresh Refresh subs rolling in with the fresh take on timeless classics. Try the honey mustard rotisserie style chicken. It's the new Subway rotisserie style chicken with a flavor upgrade, mizzled with honey mustard on hearty multigrain bread and topped with fresh hand-sliced veggies. Craving some heat? The Baja Turkey Avocado hits all the hot notes. Oven roasted turkey stacks high on hearty multigrain smeared with smashed avocado and drizzled with the pecan chipotle sauce. Tuck into new subs to savor at Subway. Eat fresh.
Guam Auto Spot has the best selection in Buick, GMC, Mitsubishi, and used cars like the 2021 Mitsubishi Mirage starting at $127 per paycheck. 0 down. Call 671-478-AUTO to take a test drive or get pre-approved online at guamautospot.com.
So here we are back on Tall Tales here after that great second half, as you were, that great halftime show that we all appreciate so much. That means we are now in the second half of Tall Tales. It means I got less than an hour to make sense of all of the really important issues that befall this island. I think it's an almost impossible job, but if anybody could do it, I think I could.
I think so, too.
Yeah.
Just don't copy the first hour for the second hour.
All right.
That's not your job.
So I want to wrap up something that I was talking with Kellis about when the halftime show began, and that is the current iteration of the Chamorro Land Trust. The Justice Department brought suit under the Fair Housing Act that the Chamorro Land Trust Act was unconstitutional because, guess what? Surprise, surprise. You had to be a Chamorro to sign up for one of the leases. And I think a couple thousand leases were actually let under that rubric. But when the Justice Department filed suit, our local government entered into a settlement agreement with the Justice Department and said no more Chamorro ancestry as a requirement. In order to be an eligible person, eligible for a Chamorro Land Trust lease, nowadays you must have had real property that was condemned by the United States or be the descendant of a person who had real property that was condemned by the United States, or you must be a person that farmed property that was condemned by the United States or the descendant of such person. So as a practical matter, I don't think the numbers, the metrics are going to change very much because there were people, I suppose, that had real property that was condemned by the United States government whose descendants are not Chamorro. If you really went out and beat the bush, but probably 95% of people falling in that category or more are going to be Chamorros.
Now, a lot of this documentation is Spanish documentation, right? To signify if you're a descendant or if your family farmed or owned that property?
Well, no, of course it has to be during the American era, not during the Spanish era.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
So it only begins from when America took over Guam.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Now, of course, it's going to make a really nice record-keeping problem. And there was a story in the paper not long ago that the records at the Ancestral Lands Commission, which is going to be riding herd on this thing, are eaten by termites. And very few people make these connections, but the Ancestral Lands Commission is going to be key to anyone being able to get one of those leases, because you're going to have to be able to show where the property was, who the owner, all of the proofs, etc., some affidavits and so on, in order to perfect your eligibility. So it's going to be a little more difficult than just showing up with your grandfather's birth certificate. But probably the real good news out of the settlement is that those who have leases are going to be able to hang on to their leases. None of the leases are going to be voided. The bad news is that those poor unfortunates that stood in line for hours back in 1995 to get on the list, nothing, not a thing. They have no claim on a Chamorro Land Trust lease any different from anyone else. They have to come up with the same proofs, which, as I just said, are going to be very difficult. So that's where we are with the Chamorro Land Trust. And let me just check and see who's on the line right now. Who's in the green? Oh, Repeat is in the green room. What a surprise. I wonder what he wants to talk about. No matter what it is, he'll probably want to say it twice. That's why we call him Repeat, right, Repeat?
Oh, yeah. Well, before I delve into the article, I think there is a possibility, like for me, I can show that my grandparents were both from Sumay, and all of Sumay was condemned. So I think there's a possibility, there was an exception that, if you can show that if your ancestors are from Sumay, then that's just, prima facie proof that, you can get a lease.
Well, I read the papers, and I didn't detect that, Pete, but
well, I just heard that in the discussions. I didn't see any documentation on it, but I think that makes sense. I mean, all of Sumay was taken, so both my grandparents were born there. What else do I need to prove?
You need to prove that the real property of your parents was taken by eminent domain. That's what you need to prove according to the settlement that our government entered into.
Yeah, they were there in the census during the censuses taken in Sumay. They owned the property that they were on, and they were pushed up the hill.
Well, it should be relatively easy then for you to come up with your proofs, Repeat.
But sometimes the documentation is it's not there. But we do have the other documentation. I don't know if the census would be sufficient. The fact that they were born in Sumay would be sufficient, but that remains to be seen. But anyways, getting to the letter, it was chopped down. I had a few more paragraphs in there, but because of the space requirements, it was chopped down. So you
probably left out the part about how much you like tall tales, right? That's probably what they cut out of there.
Yeah. So I wasn't suggesting that we take a carbon copy of anything from any of the other territories. I was just suggesting that, look, it's a possibility. And then like you, when I went to the University of Washington School of Law, they had a really good Indian law program, and I took all the Indian law classes available out there. And one of the things that I learned was that, that's why it's called a reservation, is because everything's been taken and that's just reserved for them. and historically, that's their homeland. Now, understandably, the territories were not in the possession of the United States when the Constitution was drafted, so the Constitution could not address the territories, but it does later when it talks about, it has an analog, right? Like you always talk about Article 4, section, paragraph 1, I think is that.
Article 4, Section 3.
Section 3, yeah. So that's the analog. So, and you're exactly right. Congress can, and this will be my last point before I get off, but Congress can make the rules that make exceptions to Guam. And so with the Guam constitutional process, if you look at what the Virgin Island has done, because they've done it like 5 times and it's never passed muster with Congress, but one of the things that would have to happen, and I imagine that's what would have to happen in Guam's case, is they would have to repeal certain parts of the Organic Act so that it's in harmony, if the Congress believes that that is justified. And I think we can make a case saying, look at CNMI, look at American Samoa, they have protections for the natives.
But Pete, would you want that kind of protection? Would you want a prohibition on the alienability of real property?
No, I wouldn't. And where that train has left the station on Guam a long time ago. Majority of the land on Guam is probably not owned by natives anymore. But here's the thing: is the Chamorro Land Trust, the plebiscite, and then I also talked about fishing rights. That got cut out. So those were, I had a paragraph in there that would suggested what we could try to address with the Guam Constitution. And then it also addressed the fact that it would conflict with the Constitution, but that's okay because we're an unincorporated territory, and the device to do that would have Congress repeal certain parts of the Organic Act. But the vast majority of rights that we enjoy as Americans will be left untouched. We would just give the natives, a little bit of, I guess, protection, if you want to put it that way, reservation. And that's all I was suggesting.
Okay, well, anything that makes for good talk radio can't be all bad, Repeat.
We'll repeat this again someday.
Okay, good talking to you, Pete. So long. I wish that there'd be special protection for tall people. I wonder if we have a constitutional convention, I'm going to start up this group called the Popular Front for the Liberation of Tall People.
Yeah, but you'd have to define tall, and it's a little different here on Guam.
Yeah, that's true. But, I can't just walk into a regular shoe store and buy shoes.
I think you're giant size.
Giant size, yeah. Small, medium, large, and giant. Yeah.
Oh, you Taga.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's see what we got on the card here. And, of course, how appropriate, Paul Zerzan and systemic racism. And then I've got Guam study versus accuracy, Elau versus BJ, Levin versus Fido, Joey versus ratepayers. Yeah, that's Joey Duenas, yeah, Joey Duenas, the chairman of the CCU versus ratepayers. And then GWA versus Cortec, and then more Robert Underwood versus oppressors. So starting out with systemic racism, I guess everybody gets the point here that rice is actually orange, but the narrative says it's red. And if you dare say that it's anything but red, you may get canceled. You may find a dead dog on your front porch. Bad things may happen to you. Because in the 21st century, we don't care about the truth or about facts or about reality. It's the narrative that drives every discussion. So moving on from there, we come to Guam study versus accuracy. Now, I'm not ready to go with this today. but I will be. It's going to take me a little study. This is the study that reveals Chamorros connected to culture but feel like second-class citizens. That's the story that ran on KUAM a couple days ago. The study was funded by MIT Center for International Studies and MIT Priscilla King Gray Public Service Center. And my analysis of it, I've already read it. I haven't studied it, I've read it. And my analysis is that it has a lot in common with a push poll. That is, it's not seeking information so much as it is attempting to mold opinion. But you'll have the opportunity to bask in the fullness of my analysis here one of these days. And next on the card, BJ versus Eli versus Orsini. And I want to go back to a conversation that I had with Bob Kelly. And Bob Kelly says, unlicensed, you have to, the only thing that's important, he didn't say only thing, but he said, BJ is overlooking what this is about, is whether or not unlicensed contractors are performing work here on Guam. Well, I went back and dug into BJ's report, and it's not really clear that Menzies is a construction company, and it's not really clear that the contract is to do construction work. The contract is for the operation and maintenance of the baggage handling system, not to build a baggage handling system, but to operate it and maintain it. Now, you can make an argument, well, you know, maintain, construction, etc., and counsel for GMI did a really good job of that. But it is a point, and it's something that has to be decided. And who gets to decide matters like that? Well, according to Menzies, those matters can only be decided by the contractor's licensing board. Menzies points out that the statute that creates the contractor's licensing board gives them jurisdiction over this kind of dispute. BJ's doesn't. Now, the other side, the GMI guys say, well, yeah, but that doesn't mean that he can't. So once again, there's an important point that has to be dealt with. So how do we deal with these points? I think we take the same approach that we take with criminal law. This example I used the other day. This really horrible person committed a murder in broad daylight with witnesses. So murderers must be punished. Yeah, but doesn't he get counsel and doesn't he get to go to, well, yeah, but, you know, the point is that he's got to be punished. Well, you know, perhaps he's non-compos mentis and can't distinguish between right and wrong. We can't punish him. Murderers have to be punished. So, you know, if you start out with a result that you're looking for and then work backwards from there, you always come up in the same destination. But to me, and I've probably made this point many times on the show, that the process that you use is in some cases as important as the result you reach, sometimes even more important. And my own analysis is this, that when you're dealing with complicated questions, criminal law, for example, that the public is better satisfied. Well, let me again state a hypothetical. Let's say that hypothetically we could devise a method that would always be right, 100% correct, no errors whatsoever, error-free. That's one procedure. The other procedure uses apparently fair procedures. So as the public watches one, they see, yeah, it looks like this is fair. The procedures seem to be fair. If it looks at the other, the only thing it sees is the result. And somebody's attestation, this result is correct. People like apparently fair procedures. And that's basically the construction of all of our laws when we're dealing with various kinds of contests, conflagrations, cases, whatever. And that's why we talk in terms of due process of law. So one more further complication is this. and it really sheds a lot of light on motivations. BJ, in his handling of procurement appeals, has ruled that if another government tribunal is dealing with a matter that comes before him, he won't deal with that matter until the other government tribunal is finished. Now, lawyers would understand this perfectly. You don't want conflicting results. You want to conserve hearing resources, etc. Continuity, etc., etc. So, in a sense, the way I read it, Ed Elow shot himself in the foot when he said, we've appealed this, we've asked the Contractors Licensing Board. BJ saying, well, if it's at the Contractors Licensing Board, I'm not going to go forward with it. And Elow, knowing this, knowing that there hasn't been a meeting since September, hokies up this decision and brings it to BJ saying, okay, BJ, now are you satisfied? Contractors Licensing Board has decided he needs a contractor's license and he doesn't have one. Now you can rule for us. So I don't have any problem with standing on a soapbox saying that unlicensed contractors should not be able to get government contracts on Guam. I'll stand on the soapbox. I'll even get a megaphone so that my voice can be heard far and wide. But the fact that, or because that is my feeling and my desire, doesn't mean that we have to play fast and loose with any procedural niceties that come along that might interfere with the result that I want to reach. So I just thought I'd clarify that and then move on to the next item on the card, which is Levin versus Fido. Given his performance concerning the governor and the governor's consigliere, her son-in-law, and the contract at the Pacific Star and the infamous 19th floor, the governor sued a contract to be able to show the governor didn't do anything wrong without even mentioning the consigliere, the conflict of interest, any of that stuff. So I guess maybe the Attorney General isn't interested, because if he were, he'd sue his dog. And he'd lay out all of the arguments that would favor Ed Elow and GMI in this suit that he filed against his dog. Okay, next I've got Robert Underwood versus oppressors. And I had a column from Robert Underwood that I got started on last week. I'll get back into that. But Robert told us last week, let's see if I can find that here. Yeah. Robert said, I've been teaching critical race theory since 1972. Let's head for Wrigley Field and see if we can find any oppressors over there.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts. Brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
What's a better way to celebrate Valentine's Day than celebrating it at Mescla with their 3-course meal? Starting off your meal with a salad appetizer, followed by a main entree of your choice, and of course, to top it all off, to make Valentine's as sweet as the day itself, a melting lava cake with vanilla ice cream and caramel sauce. So what are you waiting for? Call them at 671-649-2652 or visit mesclaguam.com for reservations. See you there.
Do you have a car? Do you want to get rid of it? Yeah, yes. Yes, there are people. Absolutely. How did you know? Here's the deal. Take your used car to the guys over at Nissan Guam, and they're going to take a look at it. And if they love it, and they probably will because you take care of things. You could get all kinds of money on this, cash for your car. Used car values are higher than ever before. They'll take all makes and models. Doesn't need to be a Nissan or an Infiniti. They'll give you a super fast appraisal, and you say, shoot, sign the papers. Now, you can use that as down payment on a brand new Nissan if you like, or maybe you need a used car. Maybe you're sitting around going, well, I got somebody's going to come in, they're moving to Guam and whatever, and they're going to need a ride. So let's go to Nissan Guam and check out the great sale they've got. The Nissan Ninja sale is going on. So all those used cars that people are taking in, well, they refurb them, change out the oil and the belts and all of the things that need to get taken care of, and turn them practically into brand new automobiles and give you some incredible savings, up to $14,000 on the used car inventory. Go and take a look at it. NissanGuam.com.
Here's a man known far and wide as our Carl, but better known as the most dangerous man in the room. And he wants to talk about government land taking. So go for it, our Carl.
Hey, Bob. Good afternoon. And, oh, I'm sorry. Hey, bro. I just had to say that.
All right.
I hope Jose understands he's my bro, too. I just wanted to chime in about this matter of seizure of land, eminent domain. The people who are affected, it's not a happy thing. I understand that. And you brought up about, I think it was Fort Hood, where when Fort Hood was established, I think they seized, I remember you saying 6 towns just got swallowed up.
Yep.
By Fort Hood.
That's right.
And I'm sure some of them, they might have gone to court about some issues. But I think we take for granted what we have in our judicial system. I remember when the Dave Davis opinion came out in the news, Michael Bavacqua was quoted as saying that, this is an example of the colonizer's judicial system. Which makes me wonder, if they come to power, what kind of judicial system did they have in mind? That really makes me very concerned. I remember seeing a video of Hugo Chavez, the general Hugo Chavez, the leader of Venezuela, and Venezuela is a, quote, democratic socialist country. Hugo Chavez was elected. Yet later, I remember in this video, him walking along a street and pointing at buildings and property. And he used a word, and I can't remember what the word is. It's basically nationalization of property, government seizure, and he used the Spanish version of it. But he just pointed at buildings, and he used this word, and I wish I could remember what it is, but he basically, that's nationalized. That's government property. That's government property. That's government property. And in the course of, the over 24 failed socialist experiments in the 20th century, trillions and trillions of dollars of private property, buildings, land, money, were seized. And the socialists take this down to the finest level. I was reading about families being allowed to leave Cuba. They were only allowed to leave with the clothes on their back, and they had to account for everything that that was their private property. They left everything, all their clothes, their property, their money, everything. They left with the clothes on their back, and that's that. And that's what happens in a one-party system when you concentrate power. And I think really a lot of people don't appreciate what we have. It's an imperfect world, but we do have a judicial system where we do have some kind of due process. And there, with the Bill of Rights that we have in the Constitution, some people say, well, that's no big deal. If when we separate from America, or as a socialist country, we just write it into our founding documents. But that really is, it's not as easy as that. And because what happens is that David Horowitz has pointed out, lots of socialist countries, or at least some of them, have rights. For example, Russia and China, the freedom of speech. But the problem is that with this concentration of power, speech is defined as whatever the one party decides to define it. In China and Russia's case, you're free to speak whatever you want as long as it's complementary to the Communist Party. So, I just wanted to point that out, that we don't really, too many don't have an appreciation of what we have. It's imperfect, that's true, but we do have some form of due process. And in socialist, even Democrat socialist countries, there is none of that. If there's a trial, it's a show trial. It's just for the newspapers.
Well, with respect to real property, Carl, I'm looking at the last clause of the Fifth Amendment, which reads, "Nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation." So we don't just nationalize things in the United States because we think it would be a good idea.
Yes, exactly. And the property that Chavez nationalized just by pointing at it, and Stalin and Lenin and Mao and all these other socialist, communist dictators nationalized, there was no recourse. You protest, you get shot or thrown in jail. So it's an imperfect world. We don't have a perfect system. There never will be one.
And the shortfall that all of those countries had was they didn't have anything close to tall tales.
Exactly. That is the ultimate the ultimate lack they suffered from.
Yep.
Anyway, Bob, I just wanted to toss that in there, a few thoughts about that.
Very good, Carl. Thanks for calling.
All right. Bye.
So I want to go back. I had a couple items on the card here that I didn't cover that I should cover before I go into more of Robert Underwood and critical race theory. First one is GWA versus Cortec. And there's a story in the Post about GWA removes fence on disputed land, despite its ongoing legal battle over whether the government or a private company owns land nearby and including the site of the Northern Wastewater Treatment Plant. The Waterworks Authority has removed a fence that separated the plant from a facility managed by Cortec. Last week, officials from Cortec noticed the fence was removed, and the area now has blue markers seeming to correspond with planned construction work to build a new fence. Well, whoever does that construction better have a contractor's license. This time encroaching over Cortec's concrete batch plant property. Cortec officials said this is an attempt by GWA to expand its claim to more land without compensation. Superior Court Judge Iriarte, who is presiding over the case, has already ruled that Cortec holds an ownership interest in the property. GWA has made various and sometimes contradictory arguments to support their legal claim over the property, Iriarte has noted. The utility has appealed a ruling that would allow Cortec to begin judicial review on its claims for compensation through inverse condemnation. The Daily Post sent a list of questions to GWA manager Miguel Bordallo to find out more about the removal, particularly the legal advice that supported it. And here's the list of the questions. Number 1, who made the decision to remove the fence and why was it done? Here's Miguel Bordallo's answer. I'm prohibited from answering that. It's a personnel matter. No, not really. This is Waterworks, not the port. Did GWA receive legal advice that removing the fence while the case about the disputed land was active was proper? Is more work to remove equipment and assets not belonging to GWA but present on the disputed property near the treatment plant expected? In response, Bordallo said only, quote, the fence replacement is part of the scope of work for the upgrades being constructed at GWA's Northern Wastewater Treatment Plant. Part of the scope of work. Vanessa Williams. Oh, hey, Vanessa Williams. See if we remember Vanessa Williams here.
She said something before.
Yeah. Yeah, Vanessa Williams. Just to refresh your recollection on Vanessa Williams, she made the big-time great pronouncements here in Tall Tales when she said, it's impossible to separate our choice of whether and when to have children from every other choice in our lives. Should I have a baby or should I represent Cortec? All right. Vanessa Williams, the attorney representing Cortec in the land dispute, said it remains to be seen whether the fence's removal will impact the ongoing case, but called it, quote, concerning that for the third time since 2019, the water utility has moved or removed the fence from Cortec property. Can't they make up their minds where they want that fence? So the immediate concern is whether a private property owner will have to incur more expenses to secure their property from theft, vandalism, and any water and debris runoff from the plant as a result of GWA's actions, she said. She didn't get into choices this time. Okay, and then there's a recap of previous rulings and what's going on here. Let's see here. Citing a Supreme Court of Guam case, Judge Iriarty said, for the government's claim to be lawful, it must establish that a public easement for the use and occupancy of the plan existed before it was conveyed to the estate in 2006. A grant of easement from 1980, given as evidence by the government, pertains only to sewer treatment lines, not meeting the Supreme Court's guidance that these grants must contain plain and direct language about a treatment plant. Because the grant of easement does not contain plain and direct language evidencing the grantor's intent to create a right for use and occupancy of the treatment plant, the court does not find the government has established as a matter of law the existence of an easement. So this is about a piece of property and some easements to the property. And without going into a lot of the details here, it doesn't look very good for the waterworks. Okay, next on the card is Joey Duenas versus the ratepayers. CCU to hold special meetings on pay adjustments. The Consolidated Commission on Utilities will hold a special meeting on February 10 to discuss potential pay adjustments for top officials at the Power Authority and Waterworks. This will allow performance evaluations done late last year, which included public evaluations for the general managers, among the CCU's evaluation criteria. These discussions will also come as Guam ratepayers continue to contend with ramifications of the Wuhan virus pandemic. But Chairman Joey Duenas said any decision on pay adjustments will boil down to the evaluations. Now, this is pretty ironic for the reasons that I mentioned yesterday. A lawyer, what's his name? Leon Guerrero, can't remember his first name, advised the CCU that they cannot discuss salary in executive session. They found that out the hard way when they had to eat several of their salary increases because they did it that way. So he said that you have to do the evaluations in executive session, but you can't talk salary. But you must do the evaluations in executive session. Then you come out of executive session and you can talk salary, but you can't mention the evaluations. That's what he said. Yeah. But Joey Dueñas said any decision on pay adjustments will boil down to the evaluations. So how's that going to happen? Some form of telepathy?
Body language.
Yeah. I believe that both GPA and GWA provide critical, essential services that are the basis for our life on Guam. Where's your soapbox there, Joey? You wanna start that out with the traditional introduction, Maniluhuds and Maninahu. He says, this is important to note because it is vital that these two utilities employ the best people, rank and file, as well as senior management to provide these services. All right. Last year, when the CCU scheduled evaluations for the senior management for both utilities, you asked for my personal thoughts on whether I would be in favor of any pay adjustments. I responded that after the evaluations were done, that would determine if any pay adjustments were merited. How could that be? If they can't talk about, it just doesn't follow.
The first rule of Fight Club. We don't talk about Fight Club.
That's right. The first rule of salary increases. We don't talk about evaluations. He says, I have not changed my thoughts on the subject. I continue to believe that when employees are evaluated and they merit a pay adjustment, I will vote for such adjustment. Basing pay adjustment only on whether the timing is right would mean the value of an individual's work has no meaning. The chairman continued. Yeah. I know that's the way it is in private. I know that's the way it is in private business. Private business, you're having a couple of really tough years because of this virus stuff. The company the profit margin is down to about 0.666, right? Almost disappearing. Company's just barely making it. But you've got employees who say, I'm really good at my job. You've got to give me a raise. I'd really like to give you a raise, but if I paid you any more money, we'd go broke. Well, I don't care. I'm worth it. That Joey Dueñas logic, right? And that we thought that by making the utilities autonomous, putting them in charge under this board, they would be more businesslike in their operations. I believe that it's important to reflect the value that an employee provides and the pay that he or she receives. To not do this would degrade the worth of that employee. Therefore, based on the evaluations, I will decide on the pay that I believe is appropriate to express the value that such employees provide to our ratepayers and our communities. This may not be politically acceptable thing to do, but it is the right thing to do, Dueñas said. Okay, now, one of the ways that you become more persuasive than normal is by casting an aura of self-righteousness. That really makes your arguments much more persuasive. Now we go to Commissioner Simon Sanchez, who said Dueñas had scheduled a meeting and he was not aware of whether any commissioner requested it. However, Sanchez said he did understand linking the recently completed evaluations with talk on pay adjustment. How could it be any other way? It's also Sanchez's understanding that none of the 7 employees supervised by the CCU have received pay adjustments since 2016 or when they were hired after 2016. The CCU did grant raises and bonuses in 2018 to take effect in January the following year, but discussions on these raises did not comply with law and the adjustments were held void. Evaluations were also conducted in 2020, but no adjustments followed at that time. Sanchez commended their top officials for the great job of moving us forward while modernizing Island's utility infrastructure and complying with federal consent decrees and mandates. But he also placed weight on the timing of approving any pay adjustments. I'm not sure now is the time to adjust anyone's pay, as deserving as their performance merits recognition for how well they've done their job these past 6 years. I always want to reward good work in order to attract and retain good workers, Sanchez said. But I don't think ratepayers would agree that this is the time for pay increases, as deserving as raises may be. Sanchez noted that their management team has worked hard without increasing their pay, and he will ask them to continue that work on behalf of ratepayers without an adjustment this year. Yeah, I just stop and wonder how many people who have jobs got raises here during the last year. I suspect not very many.
Well, at least not in the private industry.
Yeah. And a lot of people were just happy that they had jobs at all, not to mention raises. All right, let's head for Churchill Downs.
When's the last time you looked at your homeowner's insurance?
An easily overlooked part of covering our home is what's inside of it. Over time, we buy things we don't want to lose, but don't update our contents coverage. The smart thing to do is get the answers and level up our insurance to make sure we're totally protected.
That's the Insurance Extra Point. Get out there and make something good happen today by calling Guahan Insurance Services at 475-1162 or visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center in Tamuning.
Hafaday, this is Congressman St. Nicholas. While local COVID-19 testing has unfortunately become less available lately, there are 4 free at-home federally available COVID tests that you can have to test yourselves and your families as needed. Please contact your congressional office at 671-475-6453 or at michael.stnicholas@mail.house.gov to find out how we can help you access those tests.
This ad was paid for with official funds from the office of Congressman Michael F.Q. San Nicolas.
So here we are, Churchill Downs in Louisville, Kentucky. A couple more furlongs, and I'll be at the finish line finishing up another one of the episodes of one of the greatest radio programs in the Western Pacific, if I do say so myself.
You did.
But as usual, I'm still very proud of my humility. All right, let's go back to Simon Sanchez now. Simon has already lost the game because when it comes to virtue signaling, Joey's got it. Joey's got it in the bag. No matter what Simon says, he'll not be able to top Joey because Joey has told us that, let's see. Joey has said, I believe that it's important to reflect the value that an employee provides in the pay that he receives. To not do so would degrade the worth of that employee. Therefore, based on the evaluations, I will decide on the pay that I believe is appropriate to express the value that such employees provide to our ratepayers and our community. This may not be politically acceptable thing to do, but it is the right thing to do. Joey Duenas. Wow. Yeah, so Simon, virtue signaling in the scoreboard, virtue signaling. Joey Duenas 10, Simon Sanchez 0. He's just being practical after all. You can't do any virtue signaling if you're going to be practical and businesslike. But I don't know. Maybe Simon's not interested in that.
Well, good news, we can do evaluations of them here on Tall Tales.
That's very true. Very true. And we probably will. It's kind of our nature here on Tall Tales. Okay, so I got about 5 more minutes to go. I don't want to start on Robert Underwood and his espousing critical race theory since 1972, because it's going to take me a while to get into this. So I think I'll just cruise up and down Facebook and see who's there, see if anybody has any clever comments. And yeah, Juanita Machi was first today. Pam was right behind her.
I was next.
Well, if your name is Lonnie Salas, you were next.
Well, I was next after her.
Oh, okay. Yeah, Lonnie Salas was next. And then, let's see, Pam Duvall, again. Juanita Machi with a half a day. Rico Blancaflor, I guess, was really anxious for me to get to Churchill Downs because he says, half a day. Let's go, Brandon. Took the words right out of my mouth. And Pam Duvall has her own version, Let's Go, Lou.
Yikes.
And Rico Blancaflor, good afternoon, Judge Bob, Jose, and Tall Tales Tailgaters. Rico Blancaflor, remember when U.S. Democrats whined and cried about Merrick Garland being bamboozled out of the Supreme Court? Yeah, I remember that. Poor Garrett Garland. Yeah, I remember that. Well, Biden has a chance to rectify that. You know, Garland got screwed. He should have been confirmed. He was appointed by Obama, but he never even got a confirmation hearing. But now Biden can come forward and say, It's time for me to do, what's the word, dear? Oh, justice. Time for me to do justice. I am happy to announce that the Attorney General of the United States, Merrick Garland, will be my next appointment to the Supreme Court of the United States. No! We're going to finally unscrew him. That's what he should have said, what he could have said, but then, as Rico points out, oh, wait, Garland is a white male. Oh, well, never mind. Yeah. And in the name of anti-racism, equity, inclusion, etc., equity, Biden has said that I'm going to operate strictly on merit because the person I appoint will be a black woman. Way to go, Joe. And Colin Clark is here. Colin's pretty regular. I'm here almost every day. And I mean Colin, not Colin. Ishmael Velez says, I may not be the smartest man in the world, but at least I ain't Brandon. And Oliver G. Malakas, good afternoon. Bob, Jose, and Tailgaters. Colin comes back a little louder. Can't hear over the flyboys firing up their thrusters. You know, I've noticed fire planes, and today I saw 2 B-52s flying over my house. That's bad news for somebody. All right, well, here we are at the finish line here in Churchill Downs. We've completed another day of another exciting broadcast of Tall Tales. So I've got to wind up by saying, let's go, Brandon. See you tomorrow.
Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Spying on Congress? I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. The Inspector General of the U.S. Capitol Police Service has begun an investigation into claims that Capitol Police are conducting surveillance on some GOP members of Congress. Texas Republican Troy Nehls says Capitol Police entered his office and took pictures of legislative information. He tells Fox's Tucker Carlson tonight it's retribution for his criticism of the way the Capitol Police handled the incursion last January.
I believe that Nancy Pelosi is weaponizing the U.S. Capitol Police to investigate me, to try to silence me, intimidate me, and quite honestly, to destroy me.
The chief of the Capitol Police Service denies the allegation, says officers were merely securing the office when they found it unlocked and unoccupied. But 29 other GOP congressmen say they believe they've been improperly surveilled by the agency as well. The president of France continuing his shuttle diplomacy, trying to defuse the Ukraine crisis.
Following back-to-back meetings in Moscow and Kiev, French President Emmanuel Macron says the situation will take time to resolve, but believes his meeting with Putin went well.
We have had exchanges with President Putin, and he told me that he would not be behind any escalation.
The Ukrainian president, though, remains skeptical.
Generally, I don't quite trust words. That's why I think that every politician can show his or her openness by concrete deeds.
The Russian foreign minister said their plan was always to pull the troops back from the border near the Ukrainian capital at the end of February.
Fox's Lauren Blanchard. Meanwhile, 3 Russian warships carrying troops, tanks, and armor have entered the Black Sea, triggering fears of a possible invasion of the Ukrainian port city of Odessa. The U.S. gold medal drought in Beijing has ended. Lindsay Jacobellis has won the snowboard cross event in her 5th Olympic Games. It's the first gold for the U.S. team. America is listening to Fox News.